All right, friends, we are live. And if it's Tuesday, it means it's time for Comic Book School Live because you know what? We own Tuesdays. And if you've noticed, my background has changed. My microphone might be a little tilted as well. But that's because we are embarking on a new adventure. And I'm going to bring my co host in here who's not paying attention at all, not even ready, nothing. Mike, we are moving forward with the long-term dream that I've had of having a proper show. And hence, I am in the process of redoing what will soon become the Comic Book School studio.
That's very exciting. As you can see, I still have the prison background.
You do? Are you dialing in from a payphone?
They let me use the internet for a half hour a week.
Yeah, well, you know what, Mike? It's a good thing because we have not one, but two guests for the price of one tonight.
That's good. I like
all,
two guests.
All the people that are paying, Mike, double the value.
Excellent.
I've increased your salary as well.
Thank you. I hope so.
So, Mike, we're going to be speaking a little bit about writing, and I understand you have some bona fide chops as a writer. Is that true?
I got you could say I have a chop or two.
Like lamb chops? I got a pork chop. I think what's important, Mike, is that you are indeed a very successful writer. Not as successful as me, but successful nonetheless. You've won.
Strive up to.
You have won something that's called an Emmy.
I have not only won one, I've won three.
You've won 3 Emmys. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's a lot of luck.
A lot of luck.
I walk by the table and I just grab one every time I see one. So
you know your way around the QWERTY keyboard.
I have typed a few words, yes.
Now,
hi.
That was Now, Mike, I understand that you and I write a little bit differently, and we're going to unpack why you're wrong tonight.
Okay. We'll see what happens.
And we'll see by the end of the night if I win a couple of Emmys.
I hope so.
So we have 2 guests, and the guests are both here to talk about their expert experience in writing, and I'm going to introduce them. So the person who helped trigger the show is Rob AnderSin, who most of you already know as the thundering voice of Comic Book School. And yes, he has that voice. Go ahead, Rob, give us the voice.
Hi, everybody. How's it you?
They're the one I used to say when Rob wasn't on the show, he was either punching a planet or ripping phone books in half.
We never talk about my secret identity.
Yes, we do. And it's a little creepy. So Rob, interestingly enough, triggered the topic for this show, Mike. And it was this.
I'm triggering people.
Yeah, you're a triggerer. You triggered this idea that you wrote in this massive burst of inspiration and then got a complete issue done and then had another burst of inspiration and wrote like a complete additional issue. And I often write this way. I write in something that I call bursting. I work in bursts. And Mike, Rob did the same thing. And I asked him to come on the show and talk about it. But I also brought a second guest, Mike, somebody that the Comic Book School community knows well, Cathy Kirch, a good friend of Comic Book School. We've been seeing her every year at Comic Book School events, but also Cathy is a professor at Columbia teaching writing. And nice. Cathy runs something called My Writing Hero, which specializes in effective writing techniques for people with ADHD and how to build upon that. And I told Cathy about how I write in bursts, and Cathy had a fancy word and explained it all, and I promptly forgot about it. So I just asked her to come back on and maybe talk about it. So Cathy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, Cathy, a lot of people don't know, little known fact. Mike, can you do Cliff Clavin for us, like little known fact or anything?
Little known fact, buddy.
Little known fact. Cathy, early on in Comic Book School, when we were first starting teaching the 8-page challenge and how to write, Cathy came on and taught a class for us. Cathy, what was that class that you taught? You had like a little picture and circles.
Yes, there were pictures and circles. We talked about plot structure, specifically looking at the method of plotting using a story circle, which has its roots in Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, which anyone who's been through ninth grade English um, maybe has some flashbacks from. But we talked about how to structure a story, how to structure a plot, and how to enhance that plot through details in the story by thinking about how the piece is structured and how the plot moves through the story and how the character moves through the story.
See, Mike, and this is why Cathy and I align completely, because we believe in plotting, and you write in this haphazard sort of way where you just start writing. And I want Cathy to correct you and perhaps lambast you and perhaps talk down to you in some way.
Well, I look forward to it. I look forward to proving you both wrong.
All right. Now,
I've never been accused of outlining before. This is new.
Cathy, stay on track. We talked about this, that we were going to criticize Mike, and the goal is to get him to cry tonight. So
How dare you?
yeah. So anyway, Rob, as the impetus of the topic of tonight.
I'm not impudent. What are you talking about? It's fine. It works fine.
Rob, what you texted me, I think, delirious after like a 24-hour writing session.
No, you called me and you were like, Rob, and I was like, buddy, and I didn't sound human, and I was like, oh, sorry, I'm just creating. What's
Yes.
up?
So Rob, give us the lowdown on what you did. I'm going to have you go to the screen. Tell us what you did.
So we just gone through Hurricane Ian, so there was a bunch of work that I hadn't kind of done that I had trying to get to. We had delays on everything, so I finally sat down and finished The Expanse, which was just more lettering and editing stuff. And in the middle of it all, you start thinking about your other projects, and we just did a project this year, and I wanted to make an update to a project I already had done. And in the middle of trying to figure out, while I'm lettering another book, trying to figure out how to redo that book, it suddenly hits me that, well, what if I looked at this completely different? And instead of redoing it to be an accompanying to the first issue that I did, I'm now going to make an entirely new issue and then redo the other issue as a standalone. So there'll be 3 educational volumes that I can give, depending on the way the person approaches the subject matter and their likelihood to use it, their level that they think they're at, and the information that they're seeking. So I decided I was going to create this this companion to the first book that I had done. So for some reason, it was one of those moments where I'd kind of gotten hyper-focused, which for those who don't know, with ADHD is your body chemistry basically allows you to do what was that show Limitless was trying to do. If you ever watched Limitless, that is the basic idea of hyper-focus. You get adrenaline and other literal chemicals in your body that allow you to do things that other people can't do the same way that you're now doing it. So I was able to start from scratch and create this outline for Buddy's thing and execute it all within 24 hours. And it was more than just executing it. It was a need. And I did this while taking care of my kid, Jax, like I always do. And he got to watch TV a lot that day because I was dedicated to finishing this and I couldn't do anything but finish it. And hyperfocus can be a really great thing, but it can also get out of control because suddenly one day becomes 2 days, becomes 3 days, becomes 4 days, becomes a week of me not stopping projects as much as I should during Thanksgiving while at my family Thanksgiving dinner. I'm typing out things I want to make adjustments to as when I get home and I do that. Last night, I finally finished a third project that I did, the redoing of it. Now I redid that project and then split off a part of that third book into a now brand new mini comic that stands alone that we might add to a different part to make it a full standing comic now. And I finished. I'm going to tell you this. If you have never made a glossary, make it your goal in life to never make a glossary. Glossaries are one of the most difficult things to make in the world, especially with copyright laws and the fact that you don't want to go up against plagiarism. So imagine having to know the definition of a word, but now reword it so no one could ever say that you copy and pasted from someone else. And because the subject matter, which I'm doing, isn't readily available, I have to worry. So I have to go out and see what everyone else is defining it as. So basically one word takes about 2 hours of research to figure out what everyone else said. So you don't have to copyright anything. And then I know what everyone's going to say. Why didn't you use the plagiarism program? The words I was looking up, kids, aren't going to be picked up by a plagiarism program.
All right, we're on this topic that you called hyperfocus, Rob, and you noted that it was, I guess, aligned to ADHD. So I'm going to prompt our Columbia professor and expert in writing for individuals with ADHD, Professor Kirch.
That I also have never been called, except for the very first week I started teaching as a teaching fellow, and someone emailed me with Professor Kirch, and it still takes me aback. But I love hyperfocus, and so much so that I'm wearing my hyperfocus. It might be backwards, but my hyperfocus superpower T-shirt. And hyperfocus is, exactly as Rob said, hyperfocus is in some ways the kind of flip side of some of these struggles and challenges and quirks that come with ADHD. So the ability to hyperfocus in some ways stems from the same things that prevent us from starting tasks, even if they're very trivial, because executive dysfunction, which is something that ADHDers struggle a lot with, executive dysfunction affects our ability to start and switch tasks. And so that can make it really challenging to get started. But once we get started, sometimes it becomes even harder to stop, right? Where, if we're, say, researching for a glossary, we can stick to it and spend 2 hours on every single word and keep going and not pull ourselves out. Now, there's a bit of a double-edged sword because it's great to be able to, stay in that hyperfocus and continue to, plow forward through. But the flip side of it, of course, is that sometimes we tend to ignore all the other things going on, right? Dishes stack up. We have, if especially as writers, dirty mugs maybe start populating the desk. Things, all of a sudden, our computer dies from lack of power because our charge cord is in the other room, and we didn't want to break whatever we were doing to get up and go get it, and so. So hyperfocus is definitely one of my favorite things about ADHD, but I also recognize that it can sometimes make some other things difficult to manage. So I think it's in terms of figuring out something that works for you, the question is, how do we harness the hyperfocus without letting it be sort of, I guess, detrimental to perhaps other areas of our lives? See,
Mike, we learned something tonight.
Yeah, I know. I need more hyperfocus, but it sounds like a lot of work, though.
It depends on the person and depends on the brain. But for some of us, it's especially ADHDers, it can be very easy to fall into hyperfocus if we're really interested in something. It's, at least speaking from my own personal experience, it is impossible for me to hyperfocus on something like laundry or taxes. It's too tedious and my brain just isn't interested in it. But as soon as I find something that I'm interested in, be it a writing project or, Googling random questions like, do penguins have knees? They do.
That's what I said. They do.
Yeah, they do. But we can fall down these kind of rabbit holes very easily. And it's again, the challenge is often, how do we get started? And then sometimes we have the added challenge of how do we stop?
So Cathy, would you agree that when I'm in hyperfocus mode, I'm smarter than, like, say, Mike or something?
I guess compared to someone who's not in hyperfocus, the hyperfocused person would be, I guess, more persistent.
Is it associated with high intelligence, Cathy?
That is a very complicated question because hyperfocus is
at all.
You're
just trying to get me to insult Mike again,
you
and I'm not falling for
penguins
it.
have knees, bud. So no, it's not. You don't know these things.
Do penguins have knees? Do bees have dreams? These are questions that we all need to answer sometimes.
Yeah. Why does this roll right off your tongue like you've thought of this? prior to
Because I'm
coming on
hyper
this.
focused on these things, and
All
I
right.
have a million tabs open with all the random things that I'm researching or writing or what have you.
So Rob, take us back. You're supposed to be enjoying Thanksgiving with your peeps, and you get this idea. What happens?
You just, I mean, for me, I've got a lot more control over it than probably most do. Breaking it's harder for me, but I can always trigger it if it's something I really need to trigger inside myself to start to be able to do it. I learned it because it's a good thing. The breaking it's the hard part for me, but it's anything, you know. If you want to do something, you can commit yourself and convince yourself it's important. You can get to it. With ADHD, the harder thing is when you suddenly become unmotivated by something. I'm always writing something. I always have my notepad up. I'm like Mike. I like to write prose. I like to just put down a story, let it pour out of me. Forget an outline. An outline don't matter because it's going to magically flow out of me and it's going to be beautiful. If I try to do outlines, you've just lost me. I am now uninterested because you've given me a roadmap and your roadmap sucks and I'm going to go off-roading now. And we're going to see what happens when the alien crashes into your stupid story and we're going to ruin it now. So that's exactly how I write. I write in the way that I'm inspired in that moment. And then I write little notes, paragraphs. There's stories where I'm on Thanksgiving dinner, a paragraph, just an idea. I can write down one word, go back to my notes and know exactly what I meant by that one word and get focused on that one word. And that one word can become an entire comic book. And that's just the idea. Or a novel. I'm going to tell you, like, I can write a comic book script which surprises people in one day. If you don't want me to be really critical and do all the work because a lot of artists don't want you to be too critical. They'd rather you give them the story and tell them what pages breaks here and there and tell them about what the dialogue's going to be so they can fall in love and know how many pages they can draw it and work with you. In my experience, I have worked with people who would rather have that long script, but I like the Marvel way. I think Stan Lee was onto something the way he did comics because there's something beautiful, especially if you're able to show up for the artist anytime that they ask you a question and walk them through the scene, even if you have to pose in your underwear and do a stupid pose to show them what you're talking about to look like exactly the character, you do it. You just show them the pose, you show them what you mean, and suddenly magic happens.
All right. So Chief Justice Kirch, what are your thoughts here as you listen to Rob respond to his what I call bursting, what the rest of the world calls hyper focus? Talk to me.
Well, one thing that stood out about what Rob said was that you have to kind of convince yourself that it's important or interesting, and I think that that's something that I know for me, I unwittingly learned at an early age that I knew that I was never going to do math homework because I was supposed to. I would pretend that I was like building a time machine and I needed to, do like make all these equations or things, or I had to like, solve some sort of like rocket science, whatever. I was really into space as a kid.
Did
So it was
that
usually
work?
some
Like,
kind of.
did you somehow convince yourself that doing arithmetic would get you back home from Mars? I mean, did you really? Come on, Cathy.
I mean, I never fully believed it, but it was a form of pretend and it was a form of play and it was a form of making something that I didn't enjoy, which was math. And one of the reasons that I didn't enjoy it was because it felt like it's like, oh, well, I'm doing all this work and I'm just going to get the same answer as everybody else. That's boring.
Wait,
and so
here, who enjoyed math and did well in math in school?
I did well in math, but I did not enjoy math.
Did not enjoy math at all and didn't do well.
See, I'm with Glenn. Glenn's one of my people. He used outlines to prevent continuity errors. I like outlines. All right. So here's the thing. So first, I'm going to go to you, Mike, because you're somebody that's paid to write, making you professional. How do you approach writing when it's not specifically tasked from work? I should know that work is Cartoon Network's Robot Chicken. Is that correct, Mike?
That is correct.
They still have you there?
Well, here and there, now and then.
All right. So tell me, what exactly do you do when you're writing for fun?
For fun, I just, if there is an idea that I've written down years ago or just suddenly pops into my head, I just sit and go with it. Like, oh, whatever. Oh, there was an idea that I had for an alien that crashed into a mountain. Boom. I just sit down and go, there we go. Day one, aliens there, mountains there, take off. Instead of, because if I had to go, okay, the alien crashes into a mountain, how'd he get there? Where is he from? What's his personality? That to me it kind of bogs down what I'm trying to do. So I'd rather get into that. And if I need to go back and fill stuff out, I can.
All right. Well, that's fair. And I think that, you have the alien, you have the mountain, that you want to get them together in a non-pleasant way.
Oh, no, it was a pleasant way.
But do you just start writing or do you outline a?
Nope. I just jump right. I think outlines are helpful at certain points and in certain things that you have to write. But generally for me, when I'm just doing it for myself, I just jump in and go.
All right. So Cathy, coming back to you as our writing instructor, this is real now. I'm not joking. Tell everybody why you like me so much. No, that part I was kidding about. Cathy, knowing that many, many creative people work around or with or avoid working with their ADHD because they don't know how to work with it. Can you help us to understand, and before you answer the question, I'm going to prompt you, can you help us to understand some of the techniques that you teach? And hold on, please stand by as I select the right Chrome tab. This is one of Cathy's communities. If you're on Facebook, and we are, you can join My Writing Hero, which, as you can see, also has the URL mywritinghero.com. And it's not loading. Up here we go.
If you
there we go. And the reason I'm showing this is because Cathy has credibility. She's also an accredited teacher. Talk with us about writing, Cathy.
All right. So it is 8:24 and my meds are wearing off, but there was an initial question that you asked. What
I
was
asked
the
a big, long circular
long question?
Answer what's most convenient.
Yes. If I'm remembering right, the question had to do with like, how do we kind of harness the ADHD things? See, I'm paying attention. It's just sometimes it falls in the I don't know, the large filing cabinet that is my mind. But I think there are a couple of things that I think are most important to understand about working with our ADHD rather than against it. One is that a lot of the advice that's out there is made for neurotypical brains or non-ADHD brains, non-neurodivergent brains. And so a lot of the times when writers are trying some of these strategies, it's easy to get to be hard on ourselves and frustrated, like, why isn't this working? It's working for everybody else. Why can't I make it work? And so I think one of the things is to recognize when something isn't working and why that thing isn't working, because then you can start to figure out how to intervene and how to adjust the strategies and tweak the approaches that you're using in order to make it work for you and work with the brain that you have, rather than trying to kind of force our brains into a box that wasn't built for them in the first place. And so that's one thing. And I think the other thing that the other aspect of this, I think, is recognizing what is, if on one side we have recognizing what's not working, is we also have recognizing what is working. And so, yeah, so someone else is controlling my slides. This is so exciting.
That's me. Sorry. I thought you might want to address this.
Yeah. And so, so this is me. Normally I have purple hair, but it's all washed out now. And so, but we can go to we've already, Buddy did a much better job of introducing me than that slide was doing anyway.
Sure.
So, but in terms of harnessing hyperfocus, I want to offer a few different strategies for harnessing that particular superpower. And so I know, no purple hair. I'm sorry, Miriam. But so with hyperfocus, as we mentioned before, that it can be, even if it's difficult to start, once we start, we can kind of keep going. And so I want to offer a few different ways that we can kind of harness the power of hyperfocus, and somewhat control the ways that hyperfocus can sometimes take over in other areas of our lives. And so these strategies that I'm going to share are not not mutually exclusive. These are combinable things, but I want to offer them as tools in our toolbox that we can kind of use and pull from. And so the first thing was something that when Buddy, when you were telling me about the way that Rob works, and as Rob, you were describing just kind of like going hard and deep and just like plowing through the difficult, whether it was challenging making the glossary or other parts of the story, just kind of like continuing to move through. And so something that I learned, I think on TikTok originally, was about the idea that the idea of using a sprint the way that programmers do. And so, oh yes, this is a little bit of a comic of what we mean when we say hyperfocus or hyperfixation. Find something that we're interested in. Oh, I'm going to play with this for a while. And then all of a sudden the house is burning down. We're not even noticing. But if we are to sprint like a programmer, so in tech companies and all the people behind apps and things, a lot of times companies will do a thing called a sprint or a scrum sprint, depending on who you're talking to. And this is a bit of an oversimplification, but something that I picked up on here was that the whole idea of this sprint is that during the time of the sprint, which is a designated time and you're doing designated tasks, you're not supposed to be focusing on anything else. It's just you go all the way in on that thing, so that you can get all the bugs out and you can work through it in whatever way you need to. And then there's a set amount of time after the sprint where you're supposed to clear the backlog of all the tasks that you've ignored while the sprint was going on, right? So the dishes that pile up, the dirty mugs that have cluttered the desk, the papers that are stacking up, the mail that's pouring out of the mailbox, right? And I thought that this was a really compelling way to think about writing in these kinds of, as Buddy called them, bursts, where I think what this approach allows us to do is to be gentle with ourselves, to allow us to kind of embrace this sort of like all or nothing, 100% in aspect of hyperfocus, knowing that, okay, when I come out of hyperfocus, I'm going to take some time to clear the backlog of things. So it's okay if some of the other things pile up during this time. So this is one approach, depending on kind of like where you're at in your writing career, what other responsibilities you have, how much time you have to dedicate to this, to a sprint, whether that's like a couple of weeks or just a couple of days. This might be something to think about, or even if you're just spending an afternoon in hyperfocus, making sure like that, okay, after I'm done with the hyperfocus, I'm going to take some time and I'm going to clear the backlog of all the things that I ignored.
I love this, Cathy, because it's very practical, and it also gives you some sense of scale of how much time you should spend on one thing relative to something else. Mike, what are your thoughts? Do you carve out time to work and hyperfocus and then clear the backlog, or do you just?
I just kind of go, and then if there happens to be a backlog, if I got some time, I'll take care of it.
How about you, Rob? Did you when you were in your hyperfocus mode and bursting with creativity and productivity, what did you clear your backlog?
No, not while you're during it. You have to, like she was saying, you have to wait till after, because if you try to mess with that rhythm, see, here's one thing we're not talking about. You try to mess with hyperfocus, it actually starts to aggravate people. It starts to make depression come in. It starts to actually physically affect the person. This becomes an addiction because, again, there's biochemistry and science behind this. Your body is fixated on it. If you let, and I did this recently, if you let your your hyperfocus lasts too long, it starts to have physical side effects on your body, such as you can no longer sleep. Your heart starts to actually beat irregularly if you're not careful, because you've become addicted to your own adrenaline. This is like almost skydiving, but you're doing something. It's the weirdest phenomenon. It's diagnosed because, as she was saying, it's a neurodivergent brain that is responding to something that is what is it, fright or flight? You're in a fight or flight mode, but able to concentrate. It's like what do they call it? Jet fighters do it. The pilots of jet fighters can do this, where they can be so adrenaline driven that they can see things other people can't. And that's how they can drive at such high speeds. And that's why only, I think, 1 in a million people can actually do it. I'm not saying they have ADHD, because I don't think it's exclusive to ADHD. But they probably, if they cracked open the skull, had a neurodivergent brain and were able to get there. Because the average person, I don't think, can do this. We can fixate on things like you just, either you get it or you don't. This is one of those moments that if you've never experienced it, you have no idea. Limitless is the closest thing. I remember watching part of that TV show and being like, oh, he has hyperfocus, and walking away. Not even realizing it was about an actual drug that he was taking, because we can do that. But there are side effects. So, and like she said, when you crash today, after 7 days of allowing myself to stay on hyperfocus longer than I should have to get the projects done, I took 2 naps today. I have overeaten today. I have had to rehydrate today because I didn't take care of my diet. There was a full day where all I did was eat crackers. I survived on crackers and 2 power crunches because I was too busy to feed myself, not my son. And you have to do this. One of the biggest things to learn in hyperfocus is to make sure your house doesn't burn down.
All right. So go ahead, wrap that up. I want Cathy to keep going with the slide.
So you have to literally make deals with yourself that you will not do damage while you're in hyperfocus. And you have to learn that earlier in your life, because if you don't, you pay for it when the crash comes. And there will be a crash eventually.
All right. So Rob bursted in hyperfocus. He just talked about clearing his own backlog. What next, Professor?
Right. So yeah, exactly as Rob was saying, that there's knowing that if you're a person who does hyperfocus, knowing that that's a thing that you're going to do when you write is really useful information, because it means that you can kind of prepare for that as much as you can. Sometimes hyperfocus happens a little more spontaneously than we plan to, but sometimes we can, set things up so that when we do fall into hyperfocus, it's a little easier to kind of come out of it. It's a little easier to kind of stay in the zone, but also making sure we're leaving space and allowing ourselves to take a breather afterwards and to clear the backlog. And so so this is for, if I'm thinking of a sprint, even though sprint we think of really short distances, we can extend this from a couple of hours to, even if we're thinking of the like a whole week, as Rob was saying, or a couple of days. But the next strategy that I want to share is one that you have probably heard of before, the Pomodoro technique. But I want to talk about how we use this in, oh, Mike, I see you shaking your head. So the Pomodoro technique, so called because Pomodoro is the Italian word for tomato. And the person who developed this technique, whose name is not in my brain right now, is Italian, and so calls this the Pomodoro technique. And it's named because of those little timers that are shaped like tomatoes, that at least I grew up with. I don't know if maybe I'm showing a little bit of my age, but the timers that I grew up with, turning, you turn the timer, and the idea of the Pomodoro technique is that you are working in even shorter bursts than, say, that sort of like longer, the Scrum sprint of the programmer. So working for increments of, I think that the textbook Pomodoro technique uses increments of 25 minutes. And so the idea would be you set a timer for 25 minutes, and you hyper focus during that time. You go as far and as deep as you need to, into the zone, or into that kind of flow state, as some call it. And then the timer goes off and you take a short 5-minute break. And you can continue that cycle, kind of giving yourself a chance to like take a little bit of a breath every 25 minutes. And the idea is that every 3 to 4 Pomodoros, so every 3 to 4 cycles, you're taking a longer break. So you might do 25 and 5, 25 and 5, 25 and 30. You might take like a longer break afterwards. And so the idea here is to build in breaks, so that we kind of give ourselves permission to come out of it. Now, as Rob said, coming out of hyperfocus can be very frustrating for some. And so for some folks, this sort of like interruption can be really taxing. And so if that's the case, maybe you want to lengthen the amount of time, right? I'm going to go for 45 minutes and then 5, or I'm going to go, yes. So Miriam says, I try 45 minutes, then take a brain break. Yeah, that it's that having that chunk of time that you're dedicated to whatever it is that you're working on, and then you have a little bit of a breather, especially if we're working on a screen. It's really, really valuable, again, as Rob said, like physically, to just look away from the screen a little bit. And so I always recommend, if you're going to be doing the Pomodoro technique, that if you're working on your computer, you're writing on your computer, that during that short break, you're not just like picking up your phone and looking at another screen, right? That we want to kind of like maybe stand up, move around a little bit, look out the window, maybe on those longer breaks, like go for a walk or something. But the idea is that we kind of, it's built in that we have these breaks so that it's not a kind of like unexpected interruption that can really throw us off, but so that we're expecting it. We know that it's going to happen. And I know for me, as someone who has difficulty recognizing how much time passes, which is also a symptom that other ADHDers share, it helps me recognize how much time I'm spending on a project. Like, oh, I thought that this task that I had was going to take me an hour, but it's taken me like way more Pomodoros than I thought it was going to. And so, yeah, Buddy, did you?
Yeah, so I think that, this is a great recommendation. So Cathy, how would you recommend someone in our audience who's thinking about this technique should try it out, especially if they don't have a timer shaped like a tomato?
Well, the good news is there's an app for that. There's probably about 50, honestly. But there are, if you search in any app store, Pomodoro timer, there are plenty of free apps that you can use that will, automatically do it. If you have a smartwatch, that's most of what I use my smartwatch for. Is there's a Pomodoro app on the Fitbit, and so what I like about this one is it will buzz my wrist, and then the next timer will just start. And so I find that useful because I can easily get sidetracked in between setting timers. So it's nice to have one that's constantly running. And I think there's some apps that are like that as well.
See, I would probably spend 2 to 4 days just looking at apps in the app store. I don't think
that's what I'm doing right now.
I don't think I would actually do any work. I think I would just be like, oh, I gotta go get a watch and then
listen, there's even if you just have, well, and even if you have just a basic, that hand crank tomato, that'll do it, right? Like a kitchen timer, any sort of like that. There are a myriad of ways that you can time yourself, even if it's just the clock app on your phone, of just the idea of setting a timer and knowing that like I am going to come out of this hyperfocus in whatever designated amount of time. So it doesn't have to be as like jolting and surprising. And I can use that time to make sure that I'm taking care of myself, that I'm making sure like, okay, I'm drinking enough water, I have enough food, I'm moving around, I'm not just staring at a screen forever. And so, oh yeah, and Miriam says, I use the regular clock alarm on my phone. There's whatever the best tool is the one that you have with you. And so even the good news is a lot of these options are free, right? Most of those apps are going to be free. So if you try one and it doesn't work, oh well, delete, try something else.
All right, Cathy, keep us going. And where do we go after the Pomodoro, the Pompadour?
Pompadour.
The tomato. Yes. So the first technique we talked about was about those kind of like longer sprints and leaving ourselves space afterwards to kind of take care of the backlog. And the Pomodoro technique is the thing that is, you know, is more of a kind of a constant cycle. And you can, of course, combine those two.
Just real quick, Professor, Philip made an interesting comment here. I just wanted you to comment on this. Setting schedules is critical. Keeping them is the real trick. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I could really talk about this for a while. But I think the short version of the answer is I find that recognizing how rigorous we need our schedules to be is going to be a little bit different person to person. And so some people do really well with a very rigorous schedule, like down to the hour, this is what I'm doing at each of these times. And some folks do better with a more loose schedule. I myself like to give myself a menu of tasks with that I can kind of choose from based on what I'm kind of interested in or what's most important at the moment. That I give myself a little bit more flexibility in how I'm using whatever designated writing time.
Mike and I work differently. So I will write a schedule that's very detailed, and then during my Pomodoro break, I'll lose that schedule. And then become incredibly depressed and not do anything.
Or he'll send it to me and I'll just ignore it.
That's our working strategy. All right. Bring us home, Cathy, because I feel like, you know, if I keep interrupting you, we won't be done with this show, like, ever.
Well, and here's another term that, let me know if you're watching this live, let me know if you're familiar with this term. But the idea is body doubling, not in the way that we're used to seeing body doubles in comic books, but the idea of body doubling is when you are doing a task, in this case, writing, with someone else around. So someone else in the room. And that room can be very literal, right? In the before times, before the global panini, we would go to coffee shops and we would, you know, be, you know, typing away and sipping on our lattes, or while other people in the coffee shop are typing away and sipping on their lattes. And that was in some ways a form of body doubling because there were other people around us, right? If you're in school and maybe you go to the library to study and there are other people around. I know for me, I often got a lot of work done in the library simply because there were other people and people would judge me a lot if I was, or at least in my head, they didn't care. But in my head, people would judge me if I was doing something else other than what I was supposed to be doing. And so the idea of body doubling is can be extended to writing, whether that's like in an actual space, out in person, whether that's a coffee shop or a library, or even just like hanging out at a friend's house and both doing some writing together, or even virtually. This is something that I host in my community, in the ADHD Writers Guild. We have body doubling sessions regularly, where every week we're hopping on for a couple of hours, and we use the Pomodoro technique to kind of move us through those body doubling sessions. And so
I'd like to note that it's not the same.
It's not body correct.
It's not, and
it's not like a invasion of the body snatchers either.
No,
that's right.
No,
these are important distinctions, especially with the comic book school. Yes.
Oh, or an accountability partner.
Yes.
Would you use that accountability partner?
Yes, and I think I would yes and that, in that the accountability partner in some ways can. The accountability partner, some people use an accountability partner for DUE dates, due dates, DUE. But a body doubling would be a DO date, a due date. When are you going to do this?
So it's a different do.
Yeah.
The do and the do.
Accountability partners and body doubling can, exist as a Venn diagram, right? That our accountability partners can help us keep on top of deadlines and make sure that we're making the progress that we need. And thank you, Miriam, for spelling that out for us. The do versus do. And we can also body double with our accountability partners. I know I have a friend who
you can body double with your accountability partners. I mean, I feel like you're starting to
Listen, body doubling is an act, and a body doubling partner, accountability partner. I think the important thing is the distinction between the DUE due date and the DO date. And so you can you can use both of those things, and you can involve other people in your process in both of those ways, both to hold you accountable to deadlines, and to be with you as you're doing things. And that is part of the value of body doubling. And you can body double while you're doing that programming style Scrum sprint, and you can body double while you're doing Pomodoros. And so there are a lot of so there are, lots of different ways that you can kind of combine these strategies.
Should we try something where we keep each other accountable, or should we
where we do
careening off and never completing anything the way we usually do?
I like doing that and then watching the house burn down behind us.
Yeah, Cathy and her house burning down thing. So Cathy, as we move on and we're getting close to the end, what's a technique for finding a good body double or accountability partner? Or a clone. Francie was a clone, Mike, and we knew that from the coffee ice cream.
You should not have been a clone. They should have ended it way before that.
Sorry if you didn't see. What was the name of the show?
Alias.
Alias with Jennifer Garner. Francie was a clone. Hate to. And Rosebud the sled. Go ahead, Cathy. Go.
Well, so in terms of where to find an accountability partner, I would say look to the communities that you're already a part of. So of course, Comic Book School is a great place to find community, and I love this community. And I'm sure that if you were to comment in the chat that you're right now that you're looking for a body doubling partner, that you might be able to find someone, or join us in our communities.
Would they be able to find a partner here at My Writing Hero?
Yeah. So if you here, I can go to my next slide actually.
Oh, do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to add to
find the right button.
There's Cathy.
There's with the purple hair.
Yeah, she got the purple hair again.
I need to redo it.
Did you rinse that out just before tonight's show?
No, it's been a gradual fade.
All right. Mike, you should think about like a long flowy cut like that as well. Cathy looked, just the,
back in my day when I had hair and it would.
You did. You had very long hair, Mike. But you never were purple. Cathy rocks the purple. Cathy, are you usually purple? Because I know, is that your color?
There's a little left on the underside, but.
No, but are you always purple, or do you sometimes go different colors?
No, purple's my jam.
Okay. Mike, what's your jam? What color jam are your?
A nice mauve.
I've washed all the gray out, Mike. I'm hard brown now. That's it. I'm done with gray. Cathy, we don't have to talk about our hair dyes.
Well, so the what I was saying is like finding the communities. If we join your list, will you go back purple? Yes.
Okay, Cathy. Cathy's got some free sign.
I will go. But in terms of finding a body double partner, looking for the communities that you're already in, that you're already active in, where people already know you, that's a great place to find body doubling partners. I run a paid community where I run body doubling sessions. And so if you want to be on the wait list for when that opens again, which will be very soon, you can get on my mailing list. And I also host a free community on Facebook. If you search Writers with ADHD, it should be the first one that comes up because that's the name of the group. And you can find a community there as well.
And this is how they get on your wait list, Doctor?
Yes, that is how we get on that is how to get on the wait list so that you can be the first to know when new things are happening in the world of My Writing Hero. And
just a quick note, Glenn tried green in college and failed.
Did he fail college or did he fail the green hair?
Punctuation is definitely suspect there. Cathy, I think that's awesome. And hold on, let's put this back on the screen again. So they can find you via Instagram if we're a writing community. What's with this Instagram?
Well, that's where I am. That's where you can find me. You can also find me in the Facebook group. I would put my Twitter, but I don't know what's happening with Twitter right now. My Twitter is also my writing hero, but who knows where that's going. So my writing hero is my handle pretty much everywhere. But if you also want to find me, I'm also, of course, in my Facebook group on writers with ADHD.
And just not to get too personal, do you have ADHD, Cathy, or are you just an educator focused on this? What's your
I am very much ADHD. And so, yes, but I was like a lot of folks, I wasn't diagnosed until I hit 30. So even if you're listening to this and identifying with a lot of the things that Rob and I are talking about, and you haven't had an official diagnosis, self-diagnosis is valid in my world. So if you want to come talk to me, DM me on Instagram or come into the Facebook group. Even if you're not quite sure what's going on, if you want to talk about any of these issues, that's what I'm here for.
And that's actually, Mike, when you turn 30, you should take the ADHD test. Is there a test?
I got another couple of years, but yeah, then I'll do it.
Is it like a blood test, or does Mike have to pee in a cup or anything? Like, how does he?
I do both.
Right now, I'm doing it. Glenn circled around and let us know that his hair was the failure. Go ahead, Cathy. What were you about to say?
Well, what they should do for getting tested for ADHD was they should just ask you to make an appointment and to show up on time with the proper paperwork. And if you can't do that,
I feel like that's the test.
I do feel like
paperwork. No, you've been diagnosed.
Great. That is part of that experience, and why in a lot of the neurodivergent community, I think it's important to recognize that diagnosis and having a diagnosis is a privilege, and it's one that not everybody has access to, because it's kind of that catch-22 of like, we need the thing to. It was like we need the diagnosis to get the treatment in order to get the diagnosis.
But wait a minute. Let me just put you on the spot here.
Put me on the spot,
Chief Justice Kirch. I think that these are good techniques, even if you're not diagnosed with anything specific. Am I on track here? Is this
absolutely? And that is because everybody has a brain. And as Rob was pointing out, these are scientific things, and everybody has a dopamine system. And a lot of what Rob was talking about is linked to the dopamine system, whether that's hyperfocus, whether that's executive dysfunction, and those things can come on whether you're ADHD or whether you're just very tired, or whether you're just very stressed, right? Rob was talking about fight or flight. And so because everybody has a brain and because everybody has a dopamine system, these strategies are useful, no matter kind of where your brain is right now.
All right. So Rob, I'm going to put you on the spot. And then Mike, I'll put you on the spot too, so you have a little more time to think. Rob, what did you learn from tonight from Dr. Kirch?
Sorry, nothing.
Rob, what nothing did you not learn but want to echo with Professor Mayor Kirch?
I mean, I studied ADHD because I was one of the first clinical cases in New York City on Ritalin. I'm in medical research books, so I've lived a life. I don't. It's nothing against her. It's when you go through the experience, it's a lot different. They tried to kick me out of school because I was too hyper, and they thought I was, in their words, and the R words. I don't want to say it and get you dinged for it. So they made me take an IQ test and found out that I had an IQ higher than Einstein by 1 point. So I've lived this life. None of this is news to me, and I love what Cathy said about TikTok, by the way, because there's so many people talking about it in such a unique way that I learned more things about actually my own ADHD than I ever did from a doctor, which is really freaking sad. I don't do the body doubling. I don't do any of that. I know about it. It just, I don't like people around me when I'm creating. if they're doing the same thing as me, because then they're annoying me, and I can't explain it any other way than that. But I do go to public to have all the noises in the world take away the distraction, because now there's so much stimuli that I can relax. If I play music, I want to listen to the music.
I want to ask you about something now, and I'm going to go back. Mike, this might be something because you're older than everyone else here. The word that I think that they used to use when somebody had ADHD undiagnosed, and Rob said it, hyperactive. Is that like, right? Was that like, oh, that kid was hyperactive? And I didn't know you can't say the R word. I wasn't sure, like, because Rob is very rich and he didn't want to admit that he's rich and famous. Mayor Kirch, is that what the I don't know, the system would call people hyperactive? And Mike, I'm going to blame your family, right? Your mom was in the school system, right?
Hold on, buddy.
Yes, he's a school nurse.
Wait, I have to ask this because it's going to be funny. What do you think the H stands for in ADHD?
Happy.
Hortense.
And do you know? And do you know the difference between ADD and ADHD?
No, I don't. Kathy,
So-
help me out here.
So this
I'm
actually-
going to give it to Kathy.
This actually connects to Buddy's question. Oh, hi, Aaron.
You're not late. We just got started. We're on hour 1.
This actually does connect directly to Buddy's question of kind of how the diagnosis has changed over time. In that ADD is an older term that is no longer in the diagnostic manual. So it used to be that they separated. They used to separate ADHD and ADD as the ADD is not hyperactive. But now it's all under the same umbrella as ADHD, but they have 3 different subtypes. So the first subtype is the hyperactive impulsive type, and the other subtype, the second subtype is the inattentive subtype, which often goes undiagnosed for until adulthood for a lot of folks who are inattentive type. But then there is also combined type, which has kind of features of both of those. And so if we look way back into the diagnostic history, yes, we're absolutely seeing the R word. We're seeing we're seeing hyperactive. We're also seeing oppositional defiant disorder, which was just like, you're not listening. And
point out that women go undiagnosed more than men because women are written off far too often as being ditzy, airheaded, and that's not okay. And that is something that has to change.
Is that true that women are less frequently diagnosed?
Yes, and often are more likely to be inattentive type, which when you think about the process of diagnosing, especially in children, we're going to diagnose the thing that is most bothersome to the adults in the room, the thing that bothers the teachers, the thing that bothers the parents, and the little boy who's running around and bouncing off the walls is more likely to get a diagnosis. And are we playing like Brady Bunch? The more likely to get the diagnosis than the little girl who's sitting quietly in the corner reading, and they call it wastebasket. Oh, I'm not familiar with that term.
Never heard that term before. Really?
But yeah, it's like the quiet person who's maybe having troubles focusing, but isn't really bothering anyone, is more likely to kind of fly under the radar. And Rob's absolutely right that ADHD women and that tend to be diagnosed later in life, if at all. And so,
all right. So Mike, did they have this diagnosis when we were growing up? We didn't.
No, it was just you were hyper, or you were,
hyper. They just called you hyper, right?
Called you hyper. And they put you on Ritalin.
Well, there's an argument to say that your generation didn't have it as much as ours because of the chemicals in our foods and the things that are connecting our generation that you didn't get exposed to when you were younger. Because now they're finding real effects from artificial flavorings to all that stuff that are triggering this to mutate more, including a rise of autism. Spoiler, it was never the vaccination, kids. It's the food you're eating.
It's the foods. All right. So, but Mike, do you think that you, as a creative person, have had this distraction, or are you a focused person? Because we both know I'm unfocused. We don't even have to talk about that.
It's one of those things. I wish I had the hyper focus when I just turn it on and off, because I can't. It's one of those things that, if I really, really, really get interested in something, then you hit the flow state, or, whatever you want to call it, the hyper focus. But I've never been able to just turn it on and off. I wish I could.
No, me neither. So just a quick question, Congressperson Kirch. Are you aware if this is more prevalent in writers or in other people who are in the creative field, and is that why you focused it on writing? Glenn says, or pollution, which I agree. I'm not kidding. Like, I agree. I think there's a lot of bad problems caused by pollution, and that's why I got the Mustang running in the garage. I'm going to turn it off right after this. I'm going to turn the engine off. Go ahead, Cathy Kirch.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg question, that as my therapist terms it, folks with ADHD tend to have an allergy to boredom, and so we. Oh, Miriam, thank you. With that sort of allergy to boredom, we're attracted to things that we're really interested in, and our brains tend to seek out novelty. We're seeking out new things, which in a lot of ways makes folks with ADHD really creative and thinking of new ideas and new ways to combine ideas. And so a lot of times, ADHDers are attracted to fields that call for a lot of creativity because it's harder to be bored in some of those fields.
Does that also explain my self-centeredness and big ego? Is that
I think that's just you, buddy.
Is that no?
We're going to get another specialist on for that.
That's narcissism. ADHD.
So right. I got combined all of them. Okay, so right. I think we've learned a lot tonight, and I think that we're going to need, Cathy, we're going to need you to come back on.
I would be absolutely delighted.
Yeah, you will be delighted. Let's face it.
You better be delighted.
You better bring delight the whole way. We're going to schedule that. I have a little scheduling conflict. Cathy and I talked about it. Looks like next week we have a different guest that we'd been looking to line up. And then Cathy is going to come back and, look at this. Maryam just said, yes, come back. Cathy, if you come back, what topic will we cover? Is it like this writing circle concept that you teach your writers, or is it going to be something else? What are we going to talk about in the next episode?
I would love to talk about if I would love to get into some of the nitty gritty of some of the science behind some of what we've been talking about today. We perhaps maybe talking about how we can help our working memory in writing, because working memory is a huge part of writing, because you have to hold on to a lot of different things at once in order to write.
I agree with that.
And so if folks are interested, we can talk about working memory and writing, and we can and if there's other questions, come into the comic book school community. I'm there, and let me know what topics you're interested in, and maybe we can maybe this will be the next of many.
It is worth noting, and I will share the screen one more time. I am going to show you that right now we are in the process of shifting over our message boards to the comic book school community. which is a group. It used to be a page when Facebook preferred having a page. It is a private group. It's well managed. Rob is one of the managers. I'm one of the managers, and we do keep it extremely polite and professional. So if you are interested in participating and finding out more about this, I'll provide links to my writing hero from there so that you can go check that out. And Cathy, thank you so much for joining us tonight and participating in this, I would say, stimulating conversation. I think it's Mike, what do you think?
I think it was stimulating.
I couldn't think of a better word than that.
It was both.
We got 4 writers on the call, and we're all just agreeing with the lame word that I just.
Well, it was a funny pun that you didn't realize.
You know what I did not realize was it dirty?
No, because the whole point of ADHD is stimulation.
Stimulation. Come on.
We're normally understimulated, so we have to find something to stimulate us to actually get us to function in the right way. So when you said that, it was just funny, and it was funnier.
I was an irony, Rob.
We're not gonna argue with your word choice when it's the right word, buddy.
Way to go, bud.
I'm gonna take that, and we're gonna conclude with that. So Cathy, hang out in the break room. There is as much muffins as you can consume.
There's lots of Pomodoros too.
There's a Pomodoro when you need to. So actually, Cathy, there's a request. They want to Venn diagram do versus do with us. So we'll do that.
Ooh.
And yeah, jokes aren't funny if you have to explain it. That's right. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks.
There it is. Aaron making me feel good about hosting a show. Okay, Cathy, you can go in the back room. Muffins for you. So Rob, thank you for being the impetus for this. I think
Stop using impotent when you're talking about me. I don't.
No, impetus. Impotent is something completely different, Rob.
I don't need that rumor.
It was only that once.
That 2 times, but I mean, I was
Aaron's a little annoyed that the Twizzlers and Red Vines aren't there. I ran out. I ate them all. As you can see from my bloated face,
Red Vines are awful. They should never.
They are. They're pretty bad, but I will eat them. So Rob, tell the world at large where they can go find your material, and please give a quick warning that it is sometimes not all ages.
Well, most of the stuff that you'll find, you can find way different stuff. I go across the spectrum. I make it very clear when you're in one place versus the other. As a matter of fact, even separating where we sell the comic books into its own site. So we're very careful to cultivate the right way. You can find all my information at AnderSin, that's SIN, like the biblical sin, .online, or MrAnderSin.com. You can do the MR and the MISTER. And remember, it's SIN because it's more fun.
Rob, you can go back and eat some muffins as well. Sorry, the Twizzlers are gone. Mike, this was really helpful. Didn't you?
It was good. It's very interesting. I definitely want to come back when she's back so I can learn more. I like that.
Not when Rob's back. Yeah, I want to come back when she's back, but not when he's there.
Well, come on. It's Rob. Rob can come back anytime he wants.
He wants to come back when you're here. So there you go. They don't realize that I'll pull them on randomly, Mike. That's why I tell them to go in the lounge. And there she is. There she is. She's in the box. There you go. She's playing mine. So, Mike, I think what this was extremely helpful. I have been trying for a very long time, Mike, to find coping techniques, including changing my office space, so I'm not too close to distractions. So I'm working on that.
Okay. Well, keep working.
I got a lot of progress to make. So, but I think the important thing, Mike, is if people are struggling, and I would say that struggling is probably a good word. They're struggling, trying to figure out how to complete things that they want to get complete. Tell those stories. That's why the 8-page challenge was so effective, because it gave people a deadline that they had to shoot for, and it was achievable. I think one of the areas that, what is Rob doing? He's reading the anthology. Oh, there he is. So anyway, I think there he is, speaking of the anthology. So I think the key thing is, Mike, get involved, find a body double, and then make things happen.
And then do stuff. And then do stuff. DO.
do things. Okay.
Yeah.
So Mike, we have another guest next week. He is a movie director who is also making comic books. So do not miss that. It's probably a very interesting conversation because the person has written and directed features and is now making comic books. And then following that, we will return with Professor Kirch, who is not going to move from that seat for the next 2 weeks until it's time. And Professor Kirch, what was that shirt that you have on there again?
Hyperfocus.
Oh, it's hyperfocus. It's hyperfocus.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about the whole thing, bud.
Yeah, I know. I didn't know when she said, "Oh, I have a shirt that has hyperfocus," and I'm like, "Oh," and I didn't realize it was literally written on the shirt. I didn't know.
Come on. It's like you're not even trying.
I'm a little nervous because she's a college professor and probably will fail me. So, all right, Mike, I'm going to give my final wrap up and I'm going to be inspirational. And I should note that that's my Planet of the Apes treehouse.
Okay. It is looking sort of put together. You got to get more apes in there.
We're getting there. You be quiet. All right. Hold on. Let me carry on, Mike. I have to tell Janet that the dog is crying.
Janet, the dog's crying. My computer's about to die. I have 7% power left. So if I suddenly
you go 7%, I'm going to set you in the back room. Okay. Listen, guys, I have to tell you, I'm super pumped about this conversation. When Rob told me that he completed a comic overnight and then went and completed another comic book immediately following, I just love that idea of bursting with energy. That's how I typically write. And Mike will tell you, like, I'll be very, very productive and then completely unproductive. Very, very productive, and then I just fall into really sometimes a deep depression because I cannot figure out why I am unable to produce anything when I should be able to produce. And yeah, that is outstanding that he was able to produce like that. But I think here's the thing. If you're anything like me or somewhere in the middle or on the extreme, spectrum, there are ways that you can get help and people can help you. We encourage you to join the Facebook community because there are other people just like you who are trying to find writing partners. Mike and I are longtime writing partners, and my goal in 2023, and I pledge to you that I will complete more things, and that's it. That was it. I didn't have anything else. Other than that, I just wanted to say I will see you next week. Don't miss when we have a brand new guest who's a director and also makes comics. And then Cathy will be back. See you soon.